Hello, my name is Jim Hawk, and I'm the Executive Director of Neighbor to Neighbor. We are live this week to interview the top 4 mayoral candidates in Metropolitan Nashville and Davidson County on the issues most affecting our neighborhoods. Neighbor to Neighbor is a local, nonprofit, and nonpartisan organization founded by neighborhood leaders from across Davidson County. Since 1997, we've been equipping residents and neighborhood organizations with the tools they need to preserve and improve their neighborhoods. We are committed to helping develop informed and effective neighborhood leaders and strong and powerful neighborhood organizations. Neighbor to Neighbor does not endorse candidates. Our one-on-one interviews are designed to provide candidates with an opportunity to make voters aware of their positions on the major issues facing our neighborhoods. I'm here today with at-large council member John Cooper, who is a candidate for mayor in the upcoming elections. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to be on Neighbor to Neighbor.
We're going to get right to the questions since we're on a limited time today. We've heard a lot of talk during this campaign season about the importance of neighborhoods. We thought we'd start out by asking, why are neighborhoods important?
Well, it's like saying, why is your home important? You know, it's where you live, it's where you make your memories. It's why you live, you know. And in the end, cities are neighborhoods. And you may work in different areas, but cities are neighborhoods. And having that focus as we're rebuilding, creating this amazing city going forward, you have to stay focused on neighborhoods. It's the texture of people's lives. It's your back porch, it's your sidewalk, it's where you have a cup of coffee. It's the people that you know, it's the people in your church. That's why you live. That's why you live. That's the mission of life, is to support that.
So tell us about your neighborhood. Where do you currently live?
Well, I live on Woodlawn. I've always lived nearby. We had several more children, and we got a slightly larger house a couple blocks from where we had originally lived because we love the neighborhood. Now, my neighborhood has no sidewalks. It's a very challenged street in terms of traffic has really doubled and tripled over the last years. And I got into politics really through my neighborhood association. We had a problem. We were going to get more traffic. Metro was going to redirect traffic. We were not getting any infrastructure, and I and a couple of neighbors were asked to a neighborhood association meeting. I don't know if my spouse volunteered me or if my neighbor volunteered me. I got volunteered to go work on this problem, and in doing that, one thing led to another. One thing led to another. And in this case, we were very concerned about just an amazing amount of traffic being flowed through our neighborhood. And the lack of process and the lack of engagement that was going on with the neighborhood, it's exactly like everybody else in Nashville feels from time to time. Process that we did not feel listened to. We felt we had valid concerns, that we were being railroaded, and that was being pushed by the government, and we got active and involved. Ultimately, we kept it from happening. Now, this is back in 2002, 2003. Kept it from happening. But it was this seminal experience in my life where my neighborhood association got me into politics. One thing led to another, and ultimately ran for the council. And interestingly, most people on the council have that experience. So when people have bad public hearings and the process is not fixed yet, it's not for lack of interest in council members, because most of them got into politics the same way, which is a neighborhood meeting, got them active, got them involved. How do you do it? But they ended up in a process that they're not in control of necessarily, and the process kind of controls them. Increasingly, you worry about that between the planning and the public hearing and the zoning and this regulation and that even though they're on the council, often nobody's that happy with the outcomes. You know, I mean, not always, but in too many cases. But yeah, it was on Woodlawn, the Woodlawn Area Neighborhood Association is what got me started in politics.
Great, thank you. So you've been talking a lot this election cycle, but you've also been out in neighborhoods listening to them. What are you hearing residents say are the biggest issues impacting our neighborhoods?
Well, depends a little bit on where you are. And then one of the great things about running the county, you really do have the opportunity to represent a lot of neighborhoods. A lot of neighborhoods with often different issues, but more often than not, the lack of infrastructure, the lack of sidewalks. Now, if you're in the Nations, let me just tell you, Mary Carolyn Roberts' district, it's the Nations, had 35,000 new building permits issued in the last 4 years. 35,000 in one of 35 districts. But meantime, they're $120 million short of stormwater improvements. So you have flooding from just basic rain that's happening all over the Nations. I mean, it's pretty basic when you have a neighborhood sitting there. Is it a 1-inch rain or a 2-inch rain? If it's a 2-inch rain, I need to run home and put the sandbags out, right? That is not a city that is investing in infrastructure appropriately. Now, in other districts, the tall and skinny, the quest for density, that ends up being a question. STRs is always a question. Airbnb, short-term rentals, how is that changing neighborhoods? Displacement. Are we pushing people out, right? And we are. As costs go up, you are pushing people out of the county. I actually think that maybe the number of children in Davidson County is actually going down. As people move here without children, families with children end up feeling like they have to move out of the counties, in part because the neighborhood they want to live in is just too expensive. But so every place is different, but number one is infrastructure. Why are we investing so much in some areas that possibly could cover its own costs and then not out in the county? I used to represent District 1, which is Jolton down to Bordeaux, for a little while when a temporary absence by a council member. Hey, they have not had infrastructure investment in generations in District 1, really. It's just been a very long time. So as much as your neighborhood may feel it is not getting, there are others that have really not had any. You look at Antioch, Southeast Nashville, in 2014, the city did a study of the most dangerous intersections. It came up with 55 intersections. Most of the fatalities happened there. Most of the serious injuries happened there. We have worked on 3. Now, some are state roads, and of course we want some state help in fixing that, but we have worked on 3 of the more than 50 most dangerous intersections in the last 5 years. That's not enough. It's not appropriate.
Well, you've touched on a really important issue, equity. And it's been a major theme in this campaign season. And a lot of times we talk about inequality between individuals, but there truly is inequity amongst our neighborhoods.
Right.
North and south feel like they're dumping grounds. A lot of people feel like downtown's getting far too many resources from the city. How is your administration going to work to ensure equity in neighborhoods?
Well, it's people-based. It's people-based. It's population-based, and then it's return on investment, and then solving this problem of a whole lot of people not having had any infrastructure investment for a long period of time. Now, the argument is always made that these areas pay more property taxes, and so they should get more investment. In a democratic country, I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think that that's appropriate. You need to have the right amount of investment so that your areas work and function very well. The tourism economy, for example, will require reinvestment in it. We need that to be successful. But ultimately, you can't spend all of your money on the wealthiest areas, right? This is America. We have a 1% problem. We have to get right with bringing benefits out to the whole community. And when we do, you're really doing a lot of good things for growth. Growth is now reaching out of downtown into all of these nodes in the community. Any city that has 160 schools has 160 communities. The more investments you make, making those neighborhoods attractive and wonderful and great places to live, you will actually have a better quality of growth. And that's the next chapter in Nashville's development. And chapter 2 is bringing what's the success of downtown out into the entire community. And that is sidewalks, and that is stormwater, and that is the schools, and that is connecting greenways so that people feel like they have a safe path from their house out into the community. And these are these everyday investments. I mean, the next mayor, it's not going to be as exciting as I think people perhaps think. I mean, there's some things we should do. We should, help support family kind of destinations in Nashville. We used to have a lot of that here. We don't have that much anymore. That's part of our brand and needs to continue. But the next mayor is back to basics. It's these directing $1 million at a time back to pay, back to teachers, the first responder, police, fire pay. The fire department has fewer people than it did in 1980. Right? You just not had much investment in that direction. And then back into the bones of these communities, which is, again, these just basic everyday investments. And again, you go around, there's still not that many sidewalks. We're not solving our sidewalk problem. I mean, for the last 8 years, it's been sidewalks, sidewalks, sidewalks. We've actually poured comparatively few linear feet of sidewalks, and we've done it in a super expensive way. So, anyway, the short answer is, you can't save all of your infrastructure money just for the rich area, right? Right? That's not fair, that's not America, that's not how we're gonna be a great city.
Well, let's jump on that sidewalk issue. You're right, we've been dealing with that for a long time, and it seems like sidewalks completion is decades away.
It is.
So how do we speed that up?
Well,
How do we do it more
I'm on the audit committee of the city, and in fact, the audits show we really build the most expensive sidewalks anywhere in the United States, in part because we took out our ability to self-perform sidewalks, and we said we're just gonna hand it over to contractors. Now, normally, that could work out well. The private sector is really good at building stuff, but you have to be expert at writing the contracts, right? If you're not good at writing the contracts and then you're hiring a contractor, you will not necessarily get a good deal, right? And what's happened, they're known as embedded contractors. So we actually outsource people that actually work in the Public Works Department to build our sidewalks, but they are at a different pay level, and then they have a different level of liaison costs back to the same city that they're embedded with. And I think almost everyone agrees at this point the city needs to go back and create the ability to self-perform at this point, because other cities, linear feet of sidewalks might be $250 a foot, and in Nashville it's $1,200 a linear foot for sidewalks, which is just kind of, now, it's complex to be sure, but again, going in liaison fees, again, as it's explained to us in the council, we pay a huge fee just to negotiate for the right-of-way, okay? Which, we have excellent lawyers that work for the city for $60,000 a year, handling hundreds, if not thousands of cases in a year. Comparatively, very few right-of-ways gets negotiated for $500,000 a year. And then we pay a huge liaison fee to firms that are doing sidewalks on Metro-owned right-of-way. There isn't even a negotiation. So again, part of this is management on sidewalks. But you have to make it a priority, you have to get with it. You need a transportation plan next year that begins to jump up our game, because sidewalks are transportation too.
So let's change back to when we started out and talked about your neighborhood experience. You talked about all the stuff that was going on in your neighborhood and that you got engaged in that process. As we travel across Davidson County, we're hearing people say that they are overwhelmed by the rapid development happening in their neighborhoods, and they really are frustrated when they try to engage in the planning and zoning approval process. So, we led a study with 28 neighborhood and community leaders that we just released. It identified over 50 barriers to prevent residents from really engaging in the process. How is your administration going to work to help residents understand and engage in that process?
Well, communities have to be included in the land use decisions in their area. They have to be included. We're a democracy. It's very interesting. Atlanta has been very frustrated with land use over time. And in Atlanta, they were telling me, they wanted to use technology in a way that helped facilitate this. And they do this interesting thing. They have a bushel basket of clickers. And they go to public meetings. And right now, everybody is frustrated a little bit with public meetings because it depends on who conducts the public meeting and what is presented, and then are you even appropriately in this public meeting, or is it people that work for the development company? hijacking the public meeting, and it was never discussed, and nobody was listened to, and one person took up the meeting, et cetera. We have all been there. So in Atlanta, they devised this, which is a very interesting thing. They give, you sign in, and if you're in the neighborhood, you get a clicker. And then you sit in your seat, and there's a presentation, and the presenter formally asks a series of questions. Very carefully, they're written on the board, questions, they do the presentation, and the questions, and instantaneously everybody clicks yes or no or maybe. So you don't have one person taking over the meeting. You have a very clear finding of people that live in the neighborhood. So then the output of that is very useful to planning. It's at least a knowable finding. Right now you have a lot of meetings and people come in and what was determined? And some people come and say, I heard we were for this, and the others say, we heard you were not for this. You have a input mechanism in terms of community input, which I think is very interesting. I want to bring the people up from Atlanta who have done this to help with the city. And I get, again, I think it's appropriate for the city for us, who are on the cusp of becoming Atlanta, to really study from other cities and their practices and what they've learned from it. But again, in terms of technology and bringing community involvement, and ultimately, you don't want a lot of land use decisions that everybody is mad about all the time, which is kind of the Nashville that we're worried about. The new Nashville way. You gotta correct the charrette process and make it meaningful and make people feel that they are involved. And right now you have a system that too many people are worried that they've been placated, that they weren't really heard, but they were placated, or, you know, by the time they got around to you Thursday night at the planning commission, it was after 9:30 and somebody else had to put your children to bed, and there's no reason for this just incredibly laborious process that then nobody listened to their 2 minutes anyway when they finally said something, and it was kind of blown off. And again, I sometimes find it saying that government is not designed to work, it's designed to mitigate controversy. And certainly in planning that seems to be completely true. And so everybody that is in the process needs to feel like they were heard, right, and that their voice counted. And in some of these decisions, not all voices are equal. That if you're in the neighborhood, you should have the clicker, right, and say yes or no. It's not if you're a Tennessean, or you live in another county, or you don't live in that part of the neighborhood. Fundamentally, you need to count the people who are in that general neighborhood with some appropriate metric. It's the same metric as the notice. I mean, right now the council is trying to increase the notice requirements, that if you're within 1,000 feet. Well, that's right, that's appropriate. Why were there different notice requirements, lengths? Some of these are 75 feet, who's within the 75 feet. Some people don't, frankly, do their mail anymore, right? How do you know everybody's being noticed from this standpoint? There's a lot of areas of dysfunction. But thank you, Jim, for your question. Again, and anybody who's running Nashville has to be concerned about process and transparency, because it's easy to blow apart our city that has been pretty good at working together with this pressure of change in the new city. And then the money that can be made, well, can encourage a dysfunctional process that people are often not aware of. That what used to be a blighted area is now $3 or $5 million an acre, right? In that environment of so much money being made, you have to be extra accurate on your process.
Well, let's continue on the planning questions with a question about opportunity zones. Now, some may not be aware that these are federal incentives designed to stimulate economic growth in lower income neighborhoods. But many neighborhood leaders and community leaders have raised questions that the program actually works to gentrify the area and to displace the longtime residents. What are your views on opportunity zones, and how will your administration address these concerns?
Well, I think the honest answer is nobody knows. The rules haven't been written, they haven't been deployed, we've not seen them work. Often a lot of these things, the motivation, government by intention, is excellent. And I know a lot of people in Nashville who say, hey, I would like to make an investment in opportunity zones. The tax rules are going to be very favorable to me. Now, whether the consequences are as good as the intent intention remains to be seen. But you have to be worried. You have to be worried that it is one more tool, particularly for the potential displacement and gentrification. Now, the thing that causes me some concern is who is an opportunity zone and why? And where was that circled in? And the narrative has been that it was just the governor's office last year that identified the opportunity zones. And they did it, they had to do it quickly. They got it in time to file it. Well, is that connected to the long-term planning in that area? Not necessarily that we know. So you have to, so the jury has to be out. Is it connected over to the project that we want to do? We want to do projects. And we want to do projects in the right place. Are the opportunity projects coterminous with that? It's unclear. It's unclear right now. But the pressure to gentrify is so great that I'm sure all available tools can be repurposed into gentrification. And even that is complex, to be fair. I mean, gentrification, we're kind of not for, but at the same time, we are for our neighborhood streets looking better. We're for our neighbors being able to paint their house and have a better roof and a new air conditioning system. Is that gentrification? Well, by some definitions it is. So it's improved neighborhoods, but not pushing anybody out. So that's a very careful line. And part of that, I think, is holding the line on property taxes so that we don't raise taxes on people and push them out that way. And part of it is better jobs for people's children so that they have the income in order to stay in the neighborhoods and make these investments. So it's one of the reasons you run for mayor in a way that urban planning is probably more of an art than a science. And it depends on neighborhood by neighborhood and what the project is and when you get involved, because any cookie cutter approach to anything probably doesn't work for something as complicated as a city. 700,000 human beings in one place has a lot of area for disagreement and tension, and also a lot of area for success.
My colleague has left me giving the 5-minute warning.
Oh,
So
sorry.
I wanted to ask, then I'll just ask one last question for you today. Neighborhood organizations need space to gather and meet. Schools, community centers, and police precincts seem like obvious places. The newer police precincts were even built with neighborhood and community meetings in mind. Yet we're beginning to hear more and more from community leaders that it's becoming difficult to meet in these spaces. So how will your administration work to make these spaces more available?
Well, whoever is driving this practice of cutting back, making neighborhood event space available to neighborhoods is just wrong. And part of it is, I think, when these structures were built, and most of the police precincts, I was in one this morning, has marvelous neighborhood event space. It's constructed for the neighborhood. It's one of the few places we connect as a neighborhood. But also, let's just say, it's good for your relationship with the police department to be meeting at the precinct. We want a good relationship with the precinct. If you're having your neighborhood meeting at the precinct, you want the people at the precinct knowing who's in the neighborhood and having that great rapport. So not only should we have the meeting spaces there, we should have the meeting spaces where they are, primarily back in the precincts, because that's conducive to the kind of city that we want. And cutting that back is just, it's bad at kind of every level. It's bad for the neighborhoods and also bad for the cops. I mean, the cops are cops because they want a great neighborhood relationship, really. And the ones who've been there for many years, that's what they cherish about their job. We want that too. We want that too. We want everybody to be back in Nashville's family. And we had that going on for us for so long. As we've grown, there's some tensions about that not being true as much as it could be. And having neighborhood meetings back in the precincts, of course we want that. And schools too. I mean, schools too, you want, again, it's completely material to having a great neighborhood. And whoever is doing this, it's wrong and it needs to be cut back. It needs to be stopped from cutting back on these meetings.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you, Jim. It's a treat to be here. You're doing great public service by having all the candidates here. This is a great moment. Every 4 years, Nashville has the ability to evaluate the direction that we're going in and the ability to fine-tune and make changes in the direction. I think I and the other candidates are working very hard to provide people choices for our future going forward.
Well, thank you very much. We hope you'll tune in to the other candidates who will be videotaping later on. Have a great day.